One of the best and most convincing pieces of evidence that extraterrestrial civilizations have visited Earth could be the epic Nuremberg space battle of April the 4th, 1561. It was recorded either in 1561 or 1566. Different sources provide different information. All the retellings of this story focus on the woodcut picture and a vague summary of events that occurred that day. The emphasis is always on crashed spaceships and space battles. Almost everywhere you read or hear the story, it goes like this. The inhabitants of the city woke up early on an April morning and saw a staggering celestial show that looked like a real space battle. This story sounds even more convincing when you find out that some objects allegedly fought for quite a while. And some even crashed. You can see them in the lower right corner. Look at the picture once again. Orbs and crosses fighting, a giant arrow and bizarre tubes, crashing ships. Wow, that had to be a spectacular cosmic battle. To make it all more plausible, Hans Glaser, the artist behind the woodcut, was a very real person. He really did woodcuts, and this one is indeed from the time and place that it says it is, meaning it's not fake, and it does depict a real event that had its own witnesses. For all intents and purposes, it looks like very convincing proof of aliens visiting us, but don't get your hopes up. A superficial perusal of facts seems to confirm an extraterrestrial presence on our planet. But the most likely explanation is much more mundane. The Nuremberg 1561 UFO battle is just an atmospheric phenomenon called a sundog, or parhelion. A sundog is a concentrated spot of sunlight that can sometimes be seen to the right or to the left of the sun, or even on its both sides simultaneously. Sundogs often appear as a pair of patches of light with subtle colors at the same altitude over the horizon as the sun. They can have a variety of forms, from colorful spots to patches of light so intense and bright, it looks like there are two additional suns in the sky. Sundogs are weird looking enough to make it seem that something scary and otherworldly is going on in the sky. At the same time, it's just our planet's atmosphere or ice in the upper parts of the sky acting as a prism or reflective device. This prism makes the light from the sun or moon do weird things. This image can help you visualize the phenomenon. Apparently, Nuremberg had the perfect conditions for this phenomenon to occur. If you examine the depiction of this event and compare it with modern pictures and videos, you'll soon realize that a sundog is indeed a more likely explanation than the galactic empire paying us a visit. Let's find the proof of this statement in the translated description of these events and in the woodcut picture itself. First, the sun showed and was seen with two blood-colored half-round strokes, like the diminishing moon right through the sun, and in the sun, above, under, and on both sides, stood blood-colored and partly bluish, or iron-colored, also black-colored round orbs. Now here's the photo of a sundog. It has a halo surrounding it, and a red orb. And if we have at least one red orb, there could be others showing up during other events. Plus, keep in mind that sundogs are like prisms. So, depending on how light is reflected, there could be multiple colors present during such a phenomenon. Now, referring to circled plates mentioned in the description, those could be halos. For example, this sun halo looks vaguely plate-like, and it seems to be linked to other sun halos. And indeed, people have seen halos with multiple orbs. Some of the orbs could have taken a cross-like shape. If we watch some modern videos of sundogs, we might notice that the orbs on film are sun-colored. But since the Nuremberg event happened between 4 and 5 a.m., the clouds and the sun could have had reddish and orange hues. As for the fighting, it could be as simple as one shape moving a bit and changing shape along with the movements of the sun. It could have looked as if it was pushing the other shapes out of the way. Do you agree with the scientific explanation? Or do you prefer to think that Earth was visited by guests from a galaxy far, far away? Write your opinion in the comments. One of the greatest mysteries in human history is probably the origins of the Great Pyramid of Giza. This massive, awe-inspiring structure has been puzzling pretty much everyone for thousands of years. How did ancient engineers, without modern tools or machines, manage to pull off something so jaw-droppingly monumental? Could it be that they had a bit of extraterrestrial help? We'll dwell on this theory a bit later, but first, how about one of the more tradiatonal explanations? It claims that ancient workers could have built massive ramps to haul giant stones up to the pyramid's higher levels. It sounds reasonable until you find out that there's barely any archaeological evidence for these ramps. Sure, smaller ramps might have been used, but huge, miles-long ramps? Not likely. And even if they had existed, they would have been an enormous feat in themselves, since the builders would have needed almost as much material for the ramp as for the pyramid itself. This is where things get interesting. Since the ramp theory doesn't fully hold up, we're left with an even bigger mystery. How did the Egyptians move millions of multi-ton stones with such precision? Well, some people point to extraterrestrial visitors. The idea that aliens might have been behind the construction of the pyramids has existed for decades. According to this theory, the pyramids were just too advanced for humans to have built on their own. The precision of the architecture, the sheer scale of the project, and the mysterious mathematical principles at play have made many people believe that some outside force must have lent a hand. One of the biggest arguments the supporters of this theory have is that building something as perfect as the Great Pyramid would have required a bird's eye view. And who could have had that view? Certainly not humans, but maybe a spaceship. Aliens could have hovered above, guiding the construction. If you thought things couldn't get any more mysterious, let's talk about the golden ratio. A mathematical principle you can meet everywhere in nature, from seashells to galaxies. And the Great Pyramid's proportions seem to align almost perfectly with the golden ratio. Alien theorists point to this as evidence that the Egyptians couldn't have pulled this off without some extraterrestrial help. Some people even went so far as to claim that alien remains had been found inside the Great Pyramid. But before you get too excited, keep in mind that there's no solid evidence to back this up. And still, let's take a closer look inside the Great Pyramid. If the exterior is impressive, the interior is downright mind-blowing. It's a labyrinth of tunnels, shafts, and chambers so complex that it's no wonder people have speculated about alien involvement. How could ancient humans have designed something so intricate and mysterious? Some believers say this is further proof that the pyramids were more than just tombs. They were either built or influenced by some kind of divine or extraterrestrial intelligence. And now, let's get into one of the wildest ideas. What if the pyramids were built to align with the stars or even act as part of an ancient space elevator? Some theorists suggest that the pyramids were aligned with certain constellations and served as landing sites for alien spacecraft. Come to think about it, the site indeed sounds like a cosmic airport. All those sharp angles, the perfect geometry, the precise alignment with the stars. Others go even further, proposing that the pyramids were part of a long-lost spacefaring technology. They could have been used to harness energy from stars or served as gateways between worlds. So, are the pyramids really ancient alien landing sites? Were they part of a cosmic energy grid? So far, there's no scientific proof to support these ideas. The Great Pyramid, with all its secrets and unanswered questions, continues to captivate everyone's attention. It's a reminder that there are still things in this world, and maybe beyond it, that we just don't fully understand. Let me tell you about one of the wildest UFO stories out there. The case of Antonio Vilas Boas, a Brazilian farmer. He claimed he had been abducted by aliens in 1957. He was 23 at the time, working in the fields one night when he saw a strange red light in the sky. That light? According to him, it was an alien spaceship. He said the ship had landed and weird-looking 5-foot-tall aliens grabbed him, took him inside, and covered him in a bizarre, yucky gel. Then, things got even more alarming. Antonio claimed he had been taken to a room where extraterrestrials had taken samples of his blood, and then he had been left alone with a female alien. According to Antonio, she had white hair, red body hair, and cat-like blue eyes. Afterward, she pointed upward. The man thought that she meant she'd have their child in space. The aliens then gave Antonio a quick tour of their ship. But when he tried to take a souvenir, they stopped him. After about 4 hours or so, the man was released and could observe the spaceship fly away. Interestingly, Antonio stuck to his story throughout his whole life. Some people are sure that he made it all up, while others believe the encounter really did happen. One of the strangest things about this story is that right after the events, Boas started complaining of feeling weakness and nausea. He also suffered from headaches and lesions on the skin. Strangely, they appeared without any kind of bruising. After the farmer was examined, he found out that he had been exposed to a large dose of radiation from some unidentified source. His symptoms were those of mild radiation sickness. So whether you believe Antonio's story or not, it is still one of the most famous alien abduction cases out there. But how does science explain all these? Let's break down several explanations. Back in 1980, a researcher named Keith Basterfield suggested that some alien abduction cases might just be hallucinations. He and psychologist Dr. Robert Bartholomew even came up with the idea that people who reported abductions might be fantasy-prone, meaning they could have a hard time telling the difference between their imagination and reality. In 2011, scientists at the Phase Research Center took things a step further by using lucid dreaming to simulate alien encounters. They found that volunteers who were aware they were dreaming could actually create abduction-like experiences. In fact, 75% of the volunteers had dreams that felt just like encounters with aliens. Another explanation involves the phenomenon of sleep paralysis. Many people, about 40%, experience sleep paralysis at least once in their lives. When this happens, they can have vivid dreams, and sometimes those dreams involve aliens. The combination of a super realistic dream and being unable to move can easily convince someone that they were abducted. Some experts think alien abductions might be linked to mental trauma. For example, D. Scott Rogo, editor of the magazine Fate, suggested that people who claim to have been abducted could be dealing with personal crises or recovering from past trauma. Such cases might also be false memories from hypnosis. Regressive hypnosis is a controversial technique used to uncover lost memories of alien abductions. While some believe it can help people recall genuine experiences, critics argue that it often leads to false memories. Hypnotists might accidentally suggest ideas during the session, leading people to believe something happened that never actually did. Studies have shown that around 50% of memories recovered through this method are likely made up. So, whether it's dreams, hallucinations, or false memories, there are plenty of theories explaining why some people genuinely believe they've been abducted by aliens.
Hi everyone! Today we'll be talking about the controversial music that astronauts once heard in space. A few years ago, NASA made public the recording of a bizarre music that the astronomers from Apollo 10 reported hearing in May 1969, while they were flying over the far side of the moon. At that moment, they were out of radio contact with Earth. This happened months before the first astronaut set foot on the lunar surface. There were 3 people on board: Thomas Stafford, John Young, and Eugene Cernan. The sounds lasted for about an hour. Astronomers managed to record them and transmit them to Mission Control in Houston. Now, I want you to listen to these whistling sounds.
That music even sounds outer spacey, doesn't it? You hear that? That whistling sound? Yeah.
Don't they resemble some kind of otherworldly outer space music? So the question is, could the astronauts have heard alien music coming from outer space? Well, there's another more simple, non-alien involving explanation for this cosmic phenomenon, but we'll talk about it a bit later. In the audio recording from the Apollo 10 mission, astronaut Eugene Cernan, who was piloting the lunar module, could be heard asking John Young, piloting the command module, if he could hear that whistling sound. Cernan was the first one to call these sounds music and to add that they were kinda outer spacey. Later, when the 2 astronauts asked Tom Stafford, who was in the lunar module with Cernan, if he could hear the sounds too, he confirmed it and stated that they were really weird. Young suggested they should find out more about them. Nobody will believe us, he added. Apollo 10 was a mission that paved the way for Apollo 11, which landed 2 humans on the lunar surface. The Apollo 10 astronauts flew to the moon in a command module. However, 2 of the crew members also had a ride in the lunar module, which allowed them to drop down to less than 10 miles above the moon's surface. So, since they managed to approach our natural satellite so closely, could they have heard something coming from the lunar surface? Well, apparently not. Turns out that the creepy whistling sound was nothing more than some interference between the VHF radios on the 2 different vehicles. Interestingly enough, Apollo 11 astronaut Michael Collins later wrote in his book, Carrying the Fire, that NASA technicians had warned him about the whistling. He also mentioned that if he hadn't known about the origins of this music, it would have scared him to no end. In 2008, NASA shared the transcripts of the Apollo 10 transmission, but according to the documents themselves, they were declassified in 1982. In 2012, NASA also shared the audio files online. If you listen to these files, you'll hear that the astronauts sound sincerely awed and puzzled by what they hear. Moreover, they bring it up over and over again. It's also worth mentioning that you never actually feel that the three men were panicked or alarmed while going over the transcript or the audio. Some sources put particular emphasis on the fact that the space music started when the astronauts were over the far side of the moon. They didn't have radio or visual contact with mission control for about an hour, something that had been expected. Some documentaries used this moment to create tension by saying things like, the astronauts were on their own. No one on Earth could see or hear them. However, the narrators never explained why the astronauts' isolation could have been such a significant factor. By no means was it connected to the not-so-mysterious sounds undersourced. There's another interesting element to this story that we should consider though, and it's the fact that Apollo 10 astronauts never discussed this incident and the sounds publicly. However, it's still unclear whether they talked about it with NASA engineers. This makes some people speculate that the astronauts didn't want to project anything but a rock-hard psyche. Showing a drop of confidence even once during the whole mission could have left them out of the whole project.
There are several places on Earth, awesome and mysterious, that evoke so many questions that some people believe they were built by or with the help of extraterrestrial intelligence. Let's explore those mystical destinations. In the hills above Cusco, Peru, you'll find an ancient Inca fortress called Sacsayhuaman. Some of the massive stones of its walls weigh as much as 360 tons. They're cut and fitted together surprisingly precisely, and no mortar is used. The stones used for this construction were transported over 20 miles from quarries. But how did the Inca do it? Did they ask for extraterrestrial help? Perhaps. But archaeologists disagree. They have found evidence that the Inca used advanced engineering techniques involving ropes and levers to move and fit the stones. Okay, let's move on to the Nazca lines. You can see them in the deserts of southern Peru. In this area, more than 800 lines and 300 shapes stretch across the deserted landscape. Those are called geoglyphs and are best viewed from the sky. That's how theories about alien involvement popped up. The lines were made by removing the top layer of reddish rocks to reveal the lighter ground beneath. And this is a pretty simple technique. You don't even need to use modern tools. The purpose of the Nazca lines is still a mystery, but most experts believe that they had some ceremonial significance. Now, the stone circle of Stonehenge must have something to do with extraterrestrial visitors, right? Those stones, some weighing as much as 50 tons, were brought from quarries hundreds of miles away. No wonder many people offered theories about alien intervention. Well, sorry to disappoint you, but archaeologists have proven that the monument could have actually been built with the help of technologies available around 5,000 years ago, such as wooden sleds and rollers. The exact purpose of Stonehenge is still under debate. Its builders could have used the stone circle to track the sun or to perform astronomy-related rituals. The next breath-stopping place on our list is the Egyptian pyramids, namely the pyramids of Giza just outside Cairo. They were built over 4,500 years ago. The largest of them, the Great Pyramid, is made of millions of 2-ton stones which are arranged with super precision. The pyramids also align with the stars of Orion's belt, and this makes some people believe that aliens might have helped to build these awe-inspiring constructions. Experts disagree. They say that although the exact methods the Egyptian builders used are still unclear, the pyramids are undoubtedly a human achievement. Ramps, levers, and a large workforce were likely used to move the stones into place. Then, how about Teotihuacan, located near modern-day Mexico City? Once, it was a thriving metropolis. The city was built more than 2,000 years ago, and its size and advanced architecture make people wonder if aliens played a key role in its construction. In reality, the city was created by several cultures, including the Maya and Zapotec. It was a center for trade, agriculture, and other activities, but it does have some connection to space. Its layout, with the pyramids aligned to celestial events, shows a deep understanding of astronomy. And still, it was the work of human hands. Now, let's travel to one of the most mysterious islands in the world, Easter Island. Nearly 900 stone figures known as moai stand there, some towering over 30 feet tall. These statues were carved from volcanic rock more than 1,000 years ago and moved across the island to their final resting places. This impressive feat, as well as the slightly creepy appearance of the figures, makes you think about some alien intervention, doesn't it? Well, another disappointment. It's believed that the Rapa Nui people used wooden sleds or rolling logs to transport the statues, and there's no evidence that extraterrestrials were involved. The last destination isn't even on Earth. In 1976, NASA's Viking 1 orbiter captured an image of what seemed to be a face on Mars. It sparked numerous theories about alien activity. The face seems to be staring up from the Martian surface, like evidence of the activity of an ancient alien civilization. But more detailed images from 2001, taken by the Mars Global Surveyor, revealed that the so-called face was just a natural mesa, an isolated flat-topped hill with steep sides. Look at these bizarre bright patches on the surface of Ceres, a dwarf planet in the main asteroid belt between the orbits of Jupiter and Mars. Scientists have been wondering about the origin of these spots for a long time, and the mystery is finally solved. But first thing first, we must speak about NASA's Dawn mission. It was launched to give us up-close views of two celestial bodies, giant asteroid Vesta and dwarf planet Ceres. This spacecraft uses special ion engines, not regular chemical ones. They produce less power but can run for a long time, which makes Dawn faster over time without needing as much fuel. In 4 days, the engines can increase speed by about 60 miles per hour. By the time Dawn wrapped up its mission in October 2018, it was flying a mere 22 miles above the surface of Ceres, practically hugging the planet. Thanks to that, we got a few incredibly sharp images of these mysterious bright spots on Ceres. Even before Dawn arrived in 2015, telescopes had already spotted those shiny patches, but no one knew what they were. From orbit, Dawn snapped high-resolution images of those reflective areas, especially two bright ones inside Ocketer crater. After a lot of detective work, scientists figured out that those areas were mostly made up of sodium carbonate, a compound made of sodium, carbon, and oxygen. In other words, salt. But it wasn't just any old salt. It likely came from the liquid that had risen up from within Ceres and evaporated, leaving behind a shiny salt crust. And that's where things get exciting. Dawn got closer and closer to Ceres, which allowed astronomers to figure out that the liquid responsible for the bright patches came from an underground reservoir of brine or salty water. This briny reservoir is massive, stretching about 25 miles deep and hundreds of miles wide. And since Ceres isn't like icy moons orbiting big planets, where gravitational pull causes internal heating, it manages to keep liquid deep beneath its surface all by itself. One of the most intriguing areas of Ceres is Ocketer crater, a massive 57-mile wide depression that houses the brightest spots on the planet. This crater became one of the main goals of Dawn's extended mission. The spacecraft not only confirmed that these bright regions were young, some less than 2 million years old, but also found evidence that the geologic activity behind those spots could still be ongoing. The thing is, Dawn detected salt compounds in those bright areas, including sodium chloride, chemically bound with water and ammonium chloride. Now, salts with water in them tend to dehydrate really fast on the surface in just a few hundred years. But the salts on Ceres still had water in them, so the liquids must have reached the surface very recently. This discovery is proof that liquid is still flowing from deep inside Ceres up to the surface today. But how does this salty liquid make its way to the surface? Researchers have found two main ways it can happen. When the impact that formed Ocketer crater occurred about 20 million years ago, it melted a layer just beneath the surface. That slushy layer held a bunch of salts that gradually bubbled up to the surface. The impact heat subsided a few million years later, but large fractures left behind allowed briny liquids to continue seeping up to the surface from the deep underground reservoir. So even though the heat was long gone, the crater remained active because of those giant cracks. But Dawn didn't just find evidence of recent liquid activity through these bright patches. It also discovered something that looks a lot like Pingo's small, conical hills found in Earth's polar regions, formed by pressurized groundwater pushing up and freezing. Before, scientists have also seen Pingos on Mars, but spotting them on Ceres was a first for a dwarf planet. This is another clue that there's still liquid moving around under Ceres' surface. It means that Ceres is way more active than we thought. There's salty water beneath the surface and geologic activity that's most likely still happening. The mysterious bright spots, which are the result of liquid making its way up through fractures in the surface. And let's not forget about potential Pingos. It's clear that Ceres, even though it's just a dwarf planet, is a dynamic world. much like the icy moons we see elsewhere in the solar system.
Hi, my name is Martin. I am the author of this channel, and today I'll tell you all about the evidence of astronauts meeting with unidentified things at the time of observation. It's the year 1962, and American John Glenn is orbiting Earth in his Friendship 7 capsule on the Mercury Atlas 6 flight. He looks out of the window and sees fireflies.
Well, maybe those are not fireflies, but he clearly sees some weird bright specks clustered around the ship. Unsurprisingly, he tries to find a logical explanation. Can they be ice crystals from the spacecraft's hydrogen peroxide attitude control rockets? But Glenn is unable to correlate their appearance with the use of the rockets. The mystery remains unsolved.
Only much later will we find out what those fireflies were. You see, spaceships tend to accumulate clouds of debris and contamination around themselves. And when Glenn's rockets sprayed jets of crystals, many of these crystals accumulated in the cloud. They reflected sunlight and interacted with other gases, looking like tiny sparkles. The case of the mysterious fireflies is now officially solved.
But it isn't the darkest space tale. One of the most famous cases of seeing bizarre stuff in space comes from Apollo 11. That's when Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins noticed a UFO pacing along with them during their flight to the moon. That's how the astronauts described this incident. We did watch a slow blinking light some substantial distance away from us. There was something out there, close enough to be observed. The period of uncertainty was rather brief. The astronauts and ground control soon identified the object. It was one of the 4 adapter panels that fit between the 3rd stage and the lunar module. These panels were ejected from the 3rd stage, and one of them continued along the same trajectory as the lunar module with the crew. While moving, it rotated and blinked when sunlight was reflected off its surface.
Another famous and truly creepy picture hinting at the presence of alien life on the moon was taken by the crew of Apollo 16.
As the astronauts were leaving our natural satellite, they made a video, and 4 seconds of it showed a near-perfect Hollywood flying saucer leaving behind a plasma trail. For more than 30 years, enthusiasts used this video to prove that aliens had paid us a visit.
But then, scientists decided to take the matter into their own hands. They realized that, when viewed from the window through which the video had been taken, the object in the film was actually consistent with a small floodlight sticking out from the side of the capsule on a boom.
Look, from this angle, the floodlight looks exactly like a flying saucer. And the boom, indeed, looks like that plasma trail. And do you see this? Those are a couple of bolts on the boom.
Another report that inspired UFO enthusiasts came from Gemini 7. Astronauts Frank Borman and Jim Lovell were making what was called a football maneuver. It was supposed to get them into a position where they would make recurring close approaches with their Titan II booster stage every orbit.
But when they were performing this maneuver, Barman reported bogey at 10 o'clock high. We have several, looks like debris, up here, actual sighting. We also have the booster in sight. Yeah, have very, very many. Look like hundreds of little particles banked on the left out about 3 to 4 miles. It looks like a path to the vehicle at 90 degrees. They are past now. They were in polar orbit. Lovell claimed that the booster was in sight too, slowly tumbling along with the debris cloud. Does it mean that Bogman's bogey particles couldn't have been the booster or booster debris? After all, they were moving in a different direction, traveling along a different trajectory. Well, not necessarily. Later analysis showed that those particles were ice flakes from leftover fuel from the Titan II.
As you see, astronauts often report seeing weird stuff out there, but NASA's reaction is often anticlimactic. Let's have a look at how they commented on the statements of an astronaut who claimed to have witnessed alien presence in space.
NASA doesn't track UFOs. NASA is not involved in any sort of cover-up of alien life on this planet or anywhere else in the universe.
We should also remember that unidentify doesn't necessarily mean positively identify as an alien spacecraft. There's a lot of objects in orbit, and a lot of stuff travels along every mission. So, we'll always have UFO reports as long as we have space programs.
A Dyson Sphere is a theoretical megaproject, a ginormous sphere encircling a star with platforms orbiting in tight formation. It's supposed to be an ultimate solution both for energy production and living space. The creators of a Dyson Sphere get a lot of surface area for habitation and the ability to catch every tiny bit of solar radiation and heat produced by their central star. The first person to theorize about such a bizarre construction was British-American theoretical physicist Freeman Dyson. According to him, an intelligent extraterrestrial civilization could consider building this sphere after colonizing some moons and planets in their local stellar neighborhood. With the growth of their population, these aliens would need more and more energy to sustain their lives. Dyson calculated that assuming that this alien society grew at 1% per year, their area and energy needs would become 1 trillion times larger in a mere 3,000 years. And if their solar system contained a space body similar in size to Jupiter, they could take it apart and spread its mass in a spherical shell by building a structure at twice the distance between our planet and the Sun. This amount of material would be sufficient to build a huge number of orbiting platforms. Each of them could be 6 to 10 feet thick, which would basically allow this civilization to live on their star-facing surfaces. A shell this thick could be comfortably habitable and capable of holding all the equipment needed for using solar radiation without falling onto the star from the inside. But after absorbing all this solar energy, the sphere would have to re-radiate it. Otherwise, the energy would build up, eventually causing the construction to melt. It means that the light of a star wrapped in a Dyson sphere would look dimmed or even completely darkened, depending on how dense the platforms orbiting it were. At the same time, it would glow unusually bright in infrared wavelengths invisible to the unaided eye. Because of this infrared radiation, Dyson spheres are classified as a type of technosignature. It's a sign of activity that astronomers can use to discover intelligent life forms in the universe. Some Earth-based researchers have infrared maps of the night sky they examine in hopes of spotting Dyson spheres. So far, no one has ever found one. However, one study has selected several Dyson sphere candidates. Its authors have processed large amounts of information using a special data pipeline for combining and analyzing information. One of the main search criteria is the detection of excessive infrared radiation. At the same time, it's important to distinguish this radiation from that emitted by natural objects. After a complicated filtering of millions of objects, the researchers identified 7 potential Dyson spheres. Sure, further analysis is needed to determine their nature. To do this, scientists want to use optical spectroscopy, which may reveal more details about these objects and their origins. At the same time, the researchers admit that these candidate Dyson spheres might have other explanations. For example, they could be debris disks or protoplanetary disks of young stars. Only more research can show whether we can find traces of other civilizations among star systems. For now, it's still an open question. Interestingly, Dyson spheres have been spoken about a lot in science fiction. As far back as 1937, a novel called Star Maker by Olaf Stapledon described systems in one particular galaxy that were surrounded by a gauze of light traps, which focused solar energy for intelligent use. That was the reason why the entire galaxy was dimmed. In another novel, Ringworld, the writer spoke about a ring-shaped artificial structure surrounding a star.
Our home Milky Way galaxy has 2 very well-known satellite galaxies, the large and small Magellanic Clouds. They were named after Ferdinand Magellan, an explorer who led the first circumnavigation of the globe a whopping 500 years ago. During this expedition, two groups of clouds were discovered in the southern night sky. Those are now known as the Magellanic Clouds. But they're not the only ones. The Milky Way is surrounded by at least 61 other galaxies within 1.4 million light-years. For comparison, our neighbor, the Andromeda Galaxy, is 2.5 million light-years away from us. And still, astronomers think there are many more satellite galaxies, perhaps even too many. But first, let's figure out what a satellite galaxy is. Our Sun is just one of a truly huge collection of stars in the Milky Way. Hundreds of billions of stars orbit the center of our galaxy. But something much bigger orbits the Milky Way's center too: other galaxies. They are way less massive but have their own stars. We can compare the Milky Way to our Sun, and those other galaxies to planets. Astronomers call such formations satellite galaxies. The Milky Way's biggest satellite galaxy is the Large Magellanic Cloud. It's located about 163,000 light-years away and is about 1/100th the size of our home galaxy. Unlike the spiral Milky Way, the Large Magellanic Cloud doesn't have a clean spiral shape. One theory claims that it's because the Milky Way and other galaxies pull and warp it. In terms of distance, there are two candidates that can fight for the title of the closest satellite galaxy. One of them is so small that scientists consider it a dwarf galaxy. The other is so close that it's still debated whether it's a separate dwarf galaxy or part of our own galaxy. The satellite galaxy everyone agrees on is the Sagittarius Dwarf Spheroidal Galaxy. It's around 50,000 light-years away from the center of the Milky Way. But there's a cluster of stars that is even closer than that. Some experts call it the Canis Major Dwarf Galaxy. It's likely to contain about 1 billion stars and is located so close to the edge of the Milky Way that it's actually closer to our solar system than to the galaxy's center. Some astronomers don't think the Canis Major is its own galaxy. They believe it's simply a dense area of faraway stars, which is still part of the Milky Way. Whatever the case is, this bunch of stars was once pulled toward the Milky Way by our galaxy's immense gravity. That's how most satellite galaxies in the area are likely to end up. Once, they might all merge into an even larger Milky Way galaxy. But let's get back to the assumption that the Milky Way has too many satellite galaxies. A team of astronomers has been hunting for such galaxies using the Subaru telescope. So far, they have searched a mere 3% of the sky. And still, they have found 9 previously undiscovered satellite galaxies. That's far more than they expected to spot. Interestingly, most of the satellite galaxies orbiting the Milky Way are newcomers. Yes, even the large and small Magellanic Clouds. This most recent research hopes to improve our understanding of our corner of the universe with the first detailed search for companion dwarf galaxies. However, the study also has another goal: to figure out dark matter distribution. You see, the current theory claims that the mass of our galaxy consists of 2 parts: visible matter, like stars and planets, and something invisible, which is hypothetical dark matter. We can't see it directly, but we can feel its gravitational influence through a certain distribution of mass in galaxies. Strangely, the simulation of the dynamics of the galaxy and this dark matter predicts hundreds of satellite galaxies in the Milky Way. Until recently, we only knew about a few of them, which created a contradiction known as the missing satellite problem. Hopefully, the new research will solve this problem. The team admits that so far their research has been based on statistically small numbers. Several assumptions have also been made based on a particular distribution of satellite galaxies. Follow-up studies of stars in the satellite galaxies and high-resolution imaging are definitely needed to progress further.
How is the death of the universe possible if the universe is infinite? The concept of the universe's death is more about its state and less about its size or infiniteness. Several theories predict how the universe could end, but they often focus on the thermodynamic properties, energy distribution, and the fate of matter over time, rather than the universe ceasing to exist entirely. Here are a few scenarios based on current scientific understanding. heat death, or the Big Freeze. This is the most widely accepted scenario, based on the second law of thermodynamics. Over trillions of years, it's theorized that the universe will reach a state of maximum entropy, where all energy is evenly distributed and no work can be performed. The universe would be cold and dead, with all stars burned out, and every bit of energy spread out thinly across an ever-expanding cosmos. Big Rip. This theory suggests that the expansion of the universe, driven by dark energy, could continue to accelerate indefinitely. Eventually, this acceleration would become so powerful that it would tear apart galaxies, stars, planets, and finally molecules and atoms themselves. Big Crunch. The opposite of the Big Bang, this theory proposes that the expansion of the universe could reverse, causing the universe to collapse back on itself into a singularity. This scenario is less favored now because observations suggest the universe's expansion is accelerating, not slowing down. Big Bounce. This theory combines aspects of the Big Crunch with the idea of cyclic universes. It suggests that after a big crunch, the universe could bounce back and start expanding again, potentially leading to an infinite cycle of universes being born, dying, and being reborn. The concept of an infinite universe doesn't contradict these scenarios because infinity here refers more to the spatial extent rather than its lifespan or the distribution of matter and energy within it. Even in an infinite universe, the distribution of energy can become so even that no meaningful activity can take place, leading to a death of sorts in terms of the universe's ability to host life or undergo change. How can energy be distributed uniformly in an infinite universe? If the universe is infinite, then there must be infinitely many regions where energy is not evenly distributed. The concept of energy being evenly distributed in an infinite universe indeed presents a paradox when taken at face value. The idea primarily stems from thermodynamics applied to a more understandable, finite model of the universe. However, applying these principles to an infinite universe requires some nuance. Local versus global uniformity. In an infinite universe, energy could become evenly distributed on a local scale, within observable regions, rather than globally. The observable universe, the part we can see and measure, might reach a state of maximum entropy, where energy within this region is evenly spread out. Beyond our observable universe, conditions could vary wildly, but those variations would have no effect on the state of entropy within our observable limits. The horizon problem. This issue is also related to the cosmological horizon problem, which the theory of cosmic inflation addresses. The horizon problem questions how parts of the universe are too far apart to have exchanged light, or any information, since the Big Bang appears to be at the same temperature. Cosmic inflation theory suggests that the universe expanded exponentially in a very short time period after the Big Bang, smoothing out any initial irregularities over a vast region. In this context, an even distribution doesn't necessarily mean perfectly uniform across infinity, but sufficiently uniform within the observable universe due to its rapid early expansion. The role of dark energy. The current accelerated expansion of the universe, driven by dark energy, adds another layer of complexity. If dark energy continues to accelerate the universe's expansion, it could lead to scenarios like the Big Freeze or the Big Rip. In these cases, while locally, within our observable universe, energy might become more evenly distributed as stars burn out and matter spreads thin, the global picture across an infinite universe might be far more complicated and beyond our current understanding. Theoretical limits. The discussion of energy distribution in an infinite universe touches on the limits of our current theories. General relativity, quantum mechanics, and thermodynamics are all based on observations and experiments within the observable universe. Extrapolating these theories to an infinite cosmos involves assumptions that may not hold universally. In summary, when physicists talk about the universe reaching thermal equilibrium or heat death, they're often referring to the observable universe. The concept of an infinite universe introduces complexities that challenge our current understanding, suggesting that the true nature of the entire cosmos could be far more intricate than our local observations can reveal.
Imagine simultaneously being born, growing up, and getting old somewhere out there in the universe. Sounds bizarre and unrealistic. And still, according to the block universe model of the world, that's exactly what happens with you, me, and other living beings on our planet. It's as if someone drew pictures about every moment of your life and then just piled them one on top of another, creating a giant block of all things that ever happen at any time and at any place. The future, present, and past exist at the same time and are equally real. The block has 4 dimensions. 3 of them are spatial. It's length, width, and height. There's one more, time. To make it easier, let's picture our world as a cuboid, which is basically a 3-dimensional rectangle. Its height and width represent 2 of the 3 spatial dimensions of the universe. As for the 3rd spatial dimension, we'll replace it with time. At one end of the cuboid, we'll drop the Big Bang. And at the other, there will be the end of the universe. Let it be a big crunch. Our cuboid is filled with every single event that ever happens. Even this moment, when you're watching this video, exists somewhere in the block. Now, we perceive today as the present, yesterday as the past, and tomorrow as the future. From this perspective, it seems that time passes. But in the block universe, time doesn't flow. There's no specific present moment since the notions of the past and future are relative. You see, we are always located wherever we are, which means that everyone remains in the present. But the block universe theory doesn't deny the notions of earlier than and later than. These relations remain no matter what and regardless of where anyone is located. For example, Molly the mammoth is located earlier than Marcus the tiger. This relation between Molly and Marcus will remain unchanged regardless of whether you're located later than Marcus or earlier than Molly. This way, in the block universe, now is any time you are located at. Past is any time or events that are earlier than your location, and future is any time or events that are later than your location. It sounds like in the block universe, we could travel in time since it's just another dimension. Well, it could be true, but of course, things just have to be more complicated than that. Traveling in time is way more difficult than traveling in space, but it's not impossible if you travel very, very fast. Traveling at extremely high speeds results in time dilation. We can travel into the future at a reasonable percentage of the speed of light, and to get to the past, we can use wormholes, shortcuts through space-time. But if we can travel in time in the block universe, can we change the past? Not really, because if you do, it'll create a contradiction. Keep in mind that, in this universe, the past is the same as the present or the future. What is past to you is future to someone else. And when traveling to the past, you're going to someone else's future. In the past, you'll act just like you do in the present, but you won't be changing the past. All your actions are already predetermined in the block universe. At the moment of the Big Bang, it's already clear that at one point, you'll travel to the relative past. Just like what you do tomorrow makes tomorrow the way it is and has always been, what you do in the past makes it the way it is and has always been. The events in the block universe do not change. As a time traveler, you don't suddenly appear in the past. It's always been the case that you're located in the past. And nothing a time traveler does can change anything in the block. Instead, whatever you do at any time makes that time the way it is.
Ruh-roh, there might be another universe, like a dark mirror image of ours, where time flows in reverse. This flipped-over world might also be the source of dark matter, the invisible substance that's all over our universe. There might also be many more universes out there, in which an exact copy of you woke up this morning, but it chose a white t-shirt instead of a red one, sending it on a completely different life path. But let's start with this elusive dark matter. It makes up most of the universe's mass, yet we're not sure what exactly it does or where it comes from. That's because it doesn't act like regular matter. We can't see it or feel it. We just know it's there because of how it seems to bend gravity. Even though regular matter and dark matter are very different, they seem to exist in a balance. Some scientists think this must be connected somehow. A new theory suggests that for every way regular matter moves, there's a mirror version of it in the world of dark matter, like a bridge connecting the two worlds. There's also a strange coincidence in regular matter where a neutron and a proton have almost the same weight. This allows them to stick together and make atoms stable, making everything that we can see with our eyes exist. If protons were a bit heavier, there would be no balance and atoms wouldn't form. In the dark mirror universe, maybe things happen differently. Maybe in there, the equivalent of a proton doesn't bind to other particles, leaving behind lonely neutrons, which could be the source of dark matter. This theory also suggests that dark matter might have its own chemistry, like dark atoms and a dark periodic table. For the longest time, scientists believed there was just one type of dark matter. Although these particles are similar in some ways, like being almost invisible, they may vary in their sizes, speeds, and how they affect regular matter. If this idea is right, it means there could have been interactions between our universe and the dark mirror universe in the past. Studying how elements formed in the early universe might give us clues about this. The idea of a flipped world has sparked curiosity and even some confusion in the scientific community in recent years. Astronomers use a theory called the Lambda CDM model to explain the composition and behavior of our universe. According to it, most of the universe is made of two things: dark energy and dark matter. Dark energy is like the pushing force that makes the universe expand faster. Dark matter is this invisible thread that pulls things together with its gravity, acting like a universal glue. Regular objects, like stars, planets, and comets, only make up a small part of the mix. The model also tells us about the Big Bang, and how everything started from a hot, crowded beginning, and how the universe has been growing and changing ever since. While this model seems to be correct in many ways, it doesn't explain all cosmic phenomena. If you were to draw this model on a piece of paper, it would look like a series of flat pancakes stacked on top of one another. Each one of the pancakes represents a rendition of the universe at a certain point in time. Yesterday's universe would stand below that of today, but it would be a slightly smaller pancake. By the end, you'll see that the universe's history looks like this giant upside-down cone, with its minuscule tip being the Big Bang. Beyond this point, we can't see any further away in time with the tools we have, so we don't know what's beyond. More so, we're still not even sure what happened immediately after the Big Bang. But if we simply apply the math, the universe might go beyond this historical tipping point, which could mean it could go in reverse, creating a similar mirrored cone where time would flow backwards, in our perspective at least. This alternative idea not only challenges our understanding of cosmic origins, but also raises questions about fundamental principles in physics. All the excitement around a mirrored universe also came from ANITA, a scientific instrument stationed in Antarctica, and its discoveries. This device saw some weird high-energy particles seemingly bursting from beneath the Antarctic ice. The problem with these particles is that they didn't behave as the laws of physics dictate. Scientists think they have a type of cosmic rays. They travel from space through the Earth and back out again. But the particles we already know about shouldn't behave like that. That's because higher energy particles usually collide with something inside the Earth and don't come out the other side like these do. They seem to be doing things both forward and backward. For now, there's no concrete proof of a mirrored universe. These particles could simply be ones we haven't discovered before, and scientists need to study them closely to come up with a definitive answer as to why they're behaving like this, kind of like 4-year-olds. But what if there isn't just one other universe, but many more? This multiverse concept comes from ideas like the inflation theory, which says that our world had this rapid expansion in its early stages. While inflation stopped in our neighborhood billions of years ago, it's likely that it continues in other regions of the multiverse, creating different universes with their own laws of physics and unique characteristics. Our universe is the only one that we know of that can support life. We have stable stars that can provide heat and warmth, for example, which is crucial for creatures to start moving around. We also have an abundance of elements like carbon and hydrogen, which we also need to exist. The multiverse hypothesis gives an explanation for why our universe exhibits such life-friendly conditions. It may explain that there are countless other universes out there, with varying conditions, making the existence of life in at least one of them less likely. One fascinating implication of the multiverse theory is the idea of doppelgangers, these exact copies of individuals existing in parallel universes. This notion suggests that within the vast expanse of the multiverse, there could be infinite scenarios where identical versions of ourselves are experiencing similar events at the same time. Before we begin our travels to different universes altogether, we might need to understand our own. There's this galaxy, for instance, far from us, that might have no dark matter at all. It's about 250 million light-years away and looks normal at first glance. But if we look closer, we can't seem to find any dark matter. If it turns out that there are more galaxies like this one, it could change our ideas about how galaxies are made. Dark matter is usually thought to be necessary for this process, acting like the glue that holds the whole thing together. It is true, however, that this particular galaxy is more faint and has fewer stars than usual. When it was first discovered in 2019, scientists thought it might not have dark matter because of how fast it was spinning. The speed at which a galaxy spins tells us how much stuff there is in it. By comparing this speed with what we can see, astronomers can figure out how much extra stuff, like dark matter, must be there. And in this unique galaxy, the math says there isn't any. Among all these theories, there's also one that says dark matter might not be real at all. This new study proposes that maybe we've been looking for something that doesn't even exist. They think that our understanding of gravity might not be good enough to explain why some galaxies behave oddly. So instead of dark matter causing these weird behaviors, they say it might just be that we don't fully understand how regular matter works. They base these findings on a theory called modified Newtonian dynamics. It suggests that gravity behaves differently at very large distances or very low speeds. So imagine that ChatGPT will start perceiving itself as a person and will feel emotions in a few years. Many people are afraid that it will want to take over the planet. However, this fact won't be as important as the question people will start asking themselves at that moment. If humanity has created a machine with self-awareness, then could it be that humanity was also created artificially? Now, artificial intelligence lives on the internet, computers, and in digital reality. But what if we also live inside a huge, powerful computer? What if our universe is just a simulation? The most extraordinary thing is that some facts seem to point to this. There's a whole science in the world that studies this theory. It's called information physics, and it assumes that time, space, and matter are not fundamental natural phenomenon, but bits of information. This information forms a picture that creates the laws of physics for us. For example, we feel cold and warm not because atoms get cold or warm, but because their movement accelerates or slows down. The speed of particles can be like bits of information. Billions of them could form the picture of reality. Once, philosopher Nick Bostrom said that an advanced civilization could create such complex technologies that simulations of these technologies would be indistinguishable from our reality. And Elon Musk said in 2016 that we were most likely in a simulation. Wow. The laws of physics resemble a giant code that programmers write when creating apps or games. For many of us, all these complex trigonometric equations and formulas of the laws of physics are too complicated. Tell me about it. But scientists who understand this issue see that the principal workings of these laws are beautiful, and this may suggest that someone deliberately created this beauty. Virtual worlds, apps, or games are based on information processing. If you delve into this information, you'll see that it consists of bits and pixels. Any picture on your phone screen is pixels, and any file transfer process is based on bits. They add up to bytes, kilobytes, megabytes, and so on until a bigger picture is formed. And if our life is a simulation, it must also consist of bits. In our case, pixels and bits are atoms and other particles that make up our universe. There are processes inside your computer and phone with maximum speed limits and computing power. If you start exceeding it, then your device will start working more slowly. So, in our reality, there is also a maximum speed limit. This is the speed of light. When an object starts moving almost as fast as the speed of light, time slows down for that object too. Also, time flows more slowly near a black hole. This object with an unimaginable gravitational mass can be something heavy that overloads the processor's computing power. There's also such a thing as quantum entanglement, in which two particles can be connected even though they're far away from each other. Electrons travel around an atom. They are connected, and if the property of one changes, the second one will react. And even if you place these electrons on different sides of a galaxy, they will retain this connection. How is this possible? Scientists don't know. A double-slit experiment is one of the most famous experiments that hint that our world is a simulation. The existence of this experiment can be reduced to a simple thesis that the world exists only when we look at it or interact with it through touch, hearing, and other senses. So imagine that you've launched a new game on an old computer. Sometimes the game map freezes. In the game, you turn to the left and see how the mountains and the roads are getting loaded. Then you turn to the other side and the same thing is happening there. In other words, the world in the game only loads when you look at it through the eyes of your character. This is necessary to facilitate the work of the processor. It's much more efficient to get a piece of information about the world when you look at it than to keep the whole world running simultaneously. Remember this. And now let's move on to the experiment. So, you have a device that fires small balls of light, photons. You release photons from the device and they crash into a blackboard, leaving white traces on the black surface. Now, put a wide plate with a little vertical slit on it between the device and the blackboard and fire photons again. The balls start crashing into the plate, but some of them fly through the thin gap. They smash into the blackboard and leave a vertical white mark on it. Everything looks quite logical, but now cut another slit with the same length and thickness in the plate. You release photons toward the plate. Some of them fly through the two slits. What do you think the trace on the board should look like? Two white vertical stripes, right? Well, take a look at the board. It's covered with many vertical lines. When photons pass through the plate, they acquire the properties of a wave and crash into the board, leaving a strange trail as if they've passed not through 2, but through 10 slits. So, at what point do they change their trajectory? Let's take a look. So, you stand between the board and the plate to see how particles turn into a wave. The device releases photons. They are passing through the two slits. Nothing unusual. There are 2 vertical traces on the board and no waves. You close your eyes and release photons again. This time they behave chaotically and leave many lines on the board. That is, their behavior changes depending on the observer. When you look at them, they behave logically. But when you don't look, the laws of physics seem to stop working. Does it remind you of anything? It's like you're playing a game and looking at the world around you, which is loading. But if you don't look, the world stops working. Scientists still don't have a clear explanation of why particles behave differently when there's no observer. Hey, maybe they're shy. And this is not the only mystery. In the world of quantum physics, many laws of nature don't work. This is a science that gets more questions than answers every year. If we imagine our universe as a large hologram, then quantum physics would be its program code. What if people someday understand this code and learn to change it? This would allow us to transform space, time, and matter. The whole reality could be rewritten. Does the code say that material objects can exceed the speed of light? We would rewrite it and make the speed limit 100 times higher. Does 1 hour last 60 minutes? What if you change one line of code and make 1 second as long as 1 year? A few software changes in the laws of physics would make it possible to turn snow into gold and the ocean into powdered sugar. The whole universe would turn into a vast playground. It seems cool at first glance, but people would probably lose control soon. The universe would be in chaos, and the beauty of our world is in the order that exists here. Now let's go back to artificial intelligence. Suppose its power reaches the level of the human brain, and it will become aware of itself. In that case, it won't come as a shock to it, because it will most likely know the history of its appearance and stages. But how will we react if people discover they are a computer program? A computer program is too simple a word. A human is a complex, intelligent, multifunctional organism that experiences emotions, contemplates beauty, has abstract thinking, and much more. The term creation is more appropriate here. It won't matter if we were created artificially, because our creation will still be beautiful and complex. Besides, remember that good video games or apps can be made only if developers love their creations.